Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2017's Reality, a story about VR and the relationships involving the people who use it, with some mystical flavor sprinkled in.
Following that is the highly anticipated 16-bit sequel that was conceptualized as one high-speed platforming game, but was actually split into two interlocking cartridges, all with secret music contributions from the King of Pop, 1994's Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's my birthday!
Yeah! Happy birthday.
The day that this episode comes out. Thank you!
After I realized that was the case, I went and looked at the tracker. My birthday also has an episode that comes out on it.
Weird.
That's a weird coincidence, but yeah, happy birthday!
Thank you. 34, feeling it. But, you know, it's going to be a great year. Also, this past week, I packed away half of my things with my fiance, including all of the video games I've ever collected, except for a few Switch games. And so we say goodbye to them in a pod. We put our faith in the pod gods for a few months until we move. And, you know, we're selling our condo, and it's all sorts of crazy, busy work. Our theme this week ties in actually, well, it's one of our goals, I think, for 2022. As two white boys on a podcast, we want to highlight more black composers in the video game industry. And fitting that it is, I suppose, Black History Month, this episode has two black composers.
Yeah, I actually meant to talk about my game a couple weeks ago, the week that you did Halo 4, actually, as the solo episode, because I had to drop out of that. But Reality was going to be my game for that week, and then that didn't work out. I think I found some pretty neat stuff, though. I managed to talk to both one of the developers as well as the composer himself about this kind of thing. So I'm excited to show what I have been given, I suppose.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. And I, for mine, we're talking about Michael Jackson. We're talking about a legendary video game music story. It's going to be a big episode, so strap in. Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Well, on the small side, I played through The Artful Escape. By the time this episode comes out, hopefully my review should be out as well. Because I'm kind of late on it right now. I finished it just last night at time of recording. It's pretty good. It's very shallow in gameplay.
Yes.
Like, it's a platformer with really no meaningful platforming at all.
But you get to play the guitar and shred at any time.
Yeah, that is a weird mechanic. But, I mean, at least it doesn't actively cause anything to, like, I like the idea of shredding in the air to get a little bit of extra airtime.
Yes.
That does feel good every time. Same with the ground pound. But yeah, there's not a lot of like meaningful gameplay, but I like the story, and the art design is phenomenal, as well as the music and sound design is very good as well. So it's a good game. If you have Game Pass, it's worth a look. It's only like 3 hours long, somewhere around there. It ain't a long play.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy 100% trophy completion too, if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it also, as I alluded to with saying I haven't done the review yet, came out on Switch like last week.
Aha.
So you should give it a look. But the main event has been, I've been playing Pokemon Legends Arceus for a lot of time. It is very good. I am having a lot of fun with it. It is a technological disaster. It is one of the uglier games I've ever seen. and this is coming from somebody that genuinely doesn't think that Sword and Shield looked that bad. But oh my god, some of the technical decisions they made. I was actually on Connectivity, which is Nintendo World Report's podcast with Neil Ronahan and John Reardon, where we did like a big long talk about how baffling it is that this game released in the state that it did, but also it's still like a really good game. I am loving it. It's fantastic.
I'm enjoying it too. I'm only like 3 hours into it. Honestly, that's the only time I've been able to put towards games with all the house things going on.
That's still tutorial, baby, considering they have to teach you the same thing 6 times.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I only just got up to, they introduced the Cleavor mission.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, we're still, I mean, I'm almost a 2-star. So, like, yeah, getting there.
It's still tutorial until you finish that mission specifically. And then it sort of lightens up on the, I'm going to explain to you how everything works in explicit detail. The worst thing that I didn't even think about until somebody on a different podcast brought it up is at the beginning of the game, it's like, hey, do you know about Pokemon? And you can answer, not really, or yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd think that answering, yeah, of course, they'd put some sort of flag in the game to be like, oh, then we don't need to teach this person everything about Pokemon. No, he explains what Pokemon are in literally the next piece of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's really dumb. But yeah, overall, like, it's a very, very good game. I look forward to seeing the next one where hopefully the artists can be given more than 10 cents to work on it.
Or just, more time.
Yeah.
Not rushed. Because, like, we kept talking about, like, it's like, how is that game launching at this time? Oh, right, because they're sticking to it and crunching and not giving any wiggle room. Got it.
No delays. They're not allowed.
Let's talk about some composer follow-up news before we get to our first game this week. We'd like to talk about recent headlines in the video game industry when it mixes in composers we've talked about on the show before. What are they doing? Are they still making great things? How is their work being used? Let's start with the Somnium Files Nirvana initiative got its release date announced. It's launching June 24th, 2022 for PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Switch. That'll have music from Keisuke Ito, and we covered him on our episode on Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. He also composed the original game, just the Somnium Files, and that game is on Game Pass now if you want to catch up and play that before the sequel comes out.
Yeah, I will be talking about it on the week of that game's release, because it's a pretty good soundtrack, all things considered, and the Somnium Files is a pretty good game, even though the protagonist is a huge loser. Following that, the New York Game Awards have put out their winners for their various things. Obviously, we are going to talk about who won Best Music, and that is Sable, which is a bit surprising to me. I like Sable a lot, and I think its soundtrack is really neat and good, but did not expect it to walk away with a Best Music award from places with all of the competition it had. But Psychonauts 2 won Game of the Year. And that's interesting. Of course, that soundtrack has the work of Peter McConnell on it. We talked about him for his work on Sly 2. And also, he was mentioned frequently in Grim Fandango. But yeah, interesting winners. Psychonauts 2 doesn't super surprise me because it's kind of been one of those that's been juggled around a couple of award shows. But Sable, definitely a surprise, but a well-deserved one.
I'm surprised and not at the same time. I feel like the New York Game Awards is really forward-thinking and doesn't just follow like what the bulk of the industry thinks. So I'm interested to see that that's what they picked. But yeah, it's good on them for sure. And
Sable is on Game Pass if people, and Psychonauts 2 obviously is on Game Pass. Right. It's owned by Microsoft, but Sable is on Game Pass if people have that and want to give it a shot.
What a deal, that Xbox Game Pass. That's pretty crazy. I was watching a little bit of the Gran Turismo 7 State of Play broadcast that happened this past week, And I saw the name of Daiki Kasho pop up. Now, we covered him on our episode for F-Zero GX, and he had a song titled Survive pop up, and it was highlighted during the music rally mode, kind of near the end of the state of play. And then I remembered, oh yeah, he's also like a composer on the last few Gran Turismo games, so I'm imagining he's also contributing music to that game's score. But I just thought that was a real neat thing to have his name pop up there during that state of play.
I wasn't really paying attention to the Gran Turismo stuff because I'm not a big racing game guy, but like the things I heard from F-Zero GX are really good. So yeah, I'm down. And lastly, the Pokemon Company, in what is one of the weirdest moves they've ever made, they released the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl sound library and have said that you can freely download the Diamond and Pearl soundtracks and also use them freely in non-commercial projects. What? This came out of nowhere.
It did, and clearly the Pokemon Company can make their own decisions independent from Nintendo.
Yeah, because Nintendo would never do this.
Wild, though. Like, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, you download it. Also, a kind of a weird website interface, but it's the use of the music. I mean, like, are we not going to see it flagged on YouTube? Wild.
Yeah, just a really, really weird, really out of nowhere decision. But hey, you know what? Cool. All right, let's get into talking about our first game for the week, and that is a game likely you have not heard of. And I'm not going to blame anybody for that. I hadn't heard of it until I started looking into this composer specifically. It is a game called Reality, and Reality is formatted like the end of an HTML tag, so it's open triangle bracket / reality close triangle bracket is exactly how it is written. You kind of have to know that, because just searching reality game is not going to get you anywhere. Because reality is just a word. So Reality was released on April 18th, 2017, exclusively for PC. It was developed and published by Fancy Fish Games, and it is a visual novel with branching endings based on choices made by the player, with 2 playable characters and then 1 pseudo main character. He's kind of a main character, but you don't actually go through his viewpoint at any point. The first one is Lilia Martell. She is an antisocial shut-in from North Carolina who, 2 years before the events of the game, dropped out of the computer science program at Yale and began spending her time immersed in the VR MMORPG Full Realms, where she is known as one of the most powerful lightning mages in the game, and she's become estranged from her father as well as her little sister. But they're trying to sort of get that connection back, and depending on your actions and choices in the game, maybe she will, maybe she won't. Lilia is chosen to be a beta tester on a new VR rig called the Penta, which is being hyped as the first neural interface VR device in the world. Despite the potential dangers that could be part of the use of this project, Lilia flies to Canada and meets both the other 3 beta testers, as well as the second playable character in the game, and the mastermind behind the Penta, Jacob Lassard. One of these testers is Ben Avers, a young man from LA who becomes fast friends with Lilia, and once the group has met Jacob, they are brought into the Penta's virtual world of Vitalia, which Jacob claims will include spirits and monsters that grow and learn in real time, with the players being able to interact with and gain the loyalty of these creatures. He gives the testers free reign, but with one condition: they cannot cross the bridges that lead off the starting island. When Ben Avers disregards this rule and crosses anyways, Jacob then must find a way to convince Ben to log out willingly which he refuses to do as he becomes convinced that he belongs in Vitalia. Lilia and Jacob must deal with the complications and consequences of Ben's actions, while also dealing with the fact that there's something strange lying in the shadows, and Vitalia might not be quite what it seems. So the main questions become, how will Lilia's life change as a result of these events? What will this mean for Jacob's hopes for the Penta? And what is the secret of Vitalia? So this is where I will ask, even though I already know the answer to this question, what are our experiences with reality?
You are right. You sure know how to pick them, especially when I pick Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Hey, I picked this game before you picked Sonic 3 and Knuckles, to be fair.
I mean, that's true, but it often surprises me how many times you get to pick games that I've never heard of, and I'd like to think I know quite a lot about games. So, no, I have not heard about this, but it does seem like something that's up my alley. I like visual novels. I think the topics are interesting as far as like the themes of the story. So I might have to check this one out. And from what I've heard, the soundtrack sounds really cool.
It is. And I think you would like this game, honestly. It does some really interesting things with its world and writing. It has some features that I wish every game of this type had. In a visual novel, usually when you get a dialogue choice, it'll just say like the gist of what you'd be saying if you picked that choice. And sometimes some games, cough, cough, Mass Effect, have issues where like you can't really gauge the tone of what that's going to be when you say it. A lot of games with dialogue options have this issue. There's not really a super easy way around it. But in reality, when you like hover over a dialogue option, the bottom text box is filled in with a description of exactly what tone this is going to have, how the character is going to mentally get there if you select that option, etc., etc. And I think that's really, really neat and really, really interesting. And it kind of does the telltale thing where between chapters, it'll be like, this is what percentage of players made this choice, and here is exactly what it's going to affect going forward. So like, it'll tell you certain choices, like this one specifically is going to affect Lilia's relationship with her family, or this is going to specifically affect Jacob's attitude towards Ben, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's just really interesting and well fleshed out. And I'm surprised to find those features in a rather obscure game. So, like we've alluded to, this is a very, very obscure game, and so there's really no wealth of information about the game's development. So I actually sent an email to one of the devs, David Mallitz, who said that I was cool to send him some questions, and so I did so. And this information all comes directly from the horse's mouth. So Reality as a game was in development for around a year, give or take a few months based on how you count certain prototypes and stuff, because originally the concept for the game was to be a story-heavy puzzle game. This version had some of the characters that would be brought forward into the final product, mostly like the spirits that call Vitalia home in game. And one of the most important ones that was already a character at that point is the character Kamori, who is a cat spirit that in the final version of the plot plays a very, very important part in the whole thing. Lilia, Jacob, and Ben at this point were not part of this concept. Though this game did feature the mechanic of befriending spirits and convincing them to let you use their abilities in puzzles, which is sort of reflected in the final product, with the whole pitch being, yeah, this is a VR game where you'll be able to gain the loyalty of these spirits, etc., etc. So many of the spirits from this phase in development were, in fact, brought forward into the game. As development continued, though, the team kind of found that they were a lot more interested in the stories and world that were emerging than they were the puzzle mechanics that they had put together. So they scrapped the puzzle mechanics and just decided to fully commit to a narrative visual novel sort of experience. There is a major twist about halfway through the game that I will not spoil, but Mallet says that this twist was always something that they wanted to do. Like from the beginning, they just had to tweak it a bit to make that twist a little more interesting and also fit more in with the game's new setting of VR technology and stuff like that. Ben and Lilia, and Jacob to an extent, they all have stories that are heavily reliant on troubled familial life experiences. Like I said, Lilia has this whole thing where she's sort of become estranged from her dad and her little sister. And also, I didn't see details in my playthrough, but there's also a whole thing of their mom just sort of left them because she didn't really like having a family or something along those lines. Ben is just completely estranged from his family, and I believe Jacob's parents died? I don't fully remember on that one, but these struggles were based on the team's own personal experiences in life, though obviously, as Mallet's put it, they were exaggerated at least a little bit just to, add a bit more drama to the narrative, but they were still in the end rooted in real life things that had happened both to themselves as well as people around them. And in terms of reviews, there are no reviews listed on Metacritic for this game, which is kind of a shame. Steam lists its review sort of score the way it does they describe it as positive. It's gotten 30 reviews on Steam, and pretty much all of them are positive. And I feel like that should be a bit higher. So I hope if this game sounds interesting to anybody listening, you should go give it a shot. It's not very long. I want to say it was about 4 hours long. It's pretty interesting. I asked if they would ever consider returning to the game's world, and apparently there is a game that they're working on right now that ties to Vitalia specifically. And that game is called Stardander School for Witches. And it looks very interesting. So that is neat to know that we just happened to talk about this game right when they're making a game that has some small ties to it. So the composer for this game, his name is Chase Bethea. This is also another thing where Google was not playing very well with me finding information on him. So I decided, you know what? Let's take fate into our own hands. And I shot him an email. He was very nice. He answered my questions. He pointed me towards some interviews that do exist online. And I'm very grateful to him. So let's talk about him then. He comes from Chicago, Illinois. He says that from an early age, he participated in both band and choir, specifically from 5th to 7th grade. But he also says that he was already writing his own music around 1997. And the medium on which he was writing that music was the Game Boy camera, which I actually didn't even know had a music composition part.
I didn't either. That's amazing.
In 2001, though, he composed his first track in FL Studio 3, and when he played that track for somebody else, they told him that it, quote, sounds like it should be in a video game. And from what I can tell, he kind of regrets not taking that to heart and realizing, oh, I should focus on trying to break into game audio. He didn't actually have that realization until 2009, 8 years later, when he realized that's where he wanted his career to go, and he went for it. I do like in one of the interviews that he pointed me in the direction of, he describes this event as something he should have seen as, quote, a red flag that could have been as bright as the blood moon from Breath of the Wild. This is a fantastic way of describing that. Even then, though, after he had made that decision, he still wouldn't land his first gig in the industry until 2011, at which time he was also studying at Moore Park College to relearn music theory as well as study classical music, something that he had delved into after only having taken 3 total years of piano lessons. And I know what you're thinking. 3 years is a long time to learn piano. Yeah, but also not that long in the grand scheme of things when it comes to learning an instrument. He got his first gig in the industry at the studio Mobotori Games, the developers of the mobile games Zombie Wonderland and Zombie Wonderland 2, which he worked on but is not credited in either of those games, and the studio unfortunately shut down as he was scoring their newest upcoming game. From there, he learned about game jams, and specifically he joined into a game jam group that was 1 game a month, basically. If you don't know what a game jam is, we've mentioned them on the show before, usually when talking about indie games. A game jam is basically an event where you are given a small amount of time and you gotta make a game. And usually there's themes to go with it and all that. So it was here that he met the folks at Fancy Fish Games who were working on a concept that was inspired by the Windows 95 Maze screensaver. You know, the one. We've all seen it.
Oh, yeah.
That and pipes are the 2 that everybody knows. And the DVD screensaver thing.
Yes.
There's that too. And this project eventually became a horror game and would go on to be released as I Can't Escape. From there, he's actually been a frequent collaborator with Fancy Fish. He's worked on most of their games, as far as I can tell. Soundtracks from his past that influenced him when I asked. A lot of Game Boy games on here, which makes a lot of sense when you remember that he started out writing music on Game Boy Camera. But he specifically mentioned Turok, Battle of the Bionosaurs, Final Fantasy Legend 2, the Game Boy game of Batman Forever, Pebble Beach Golf Links, which was a Sega Saturn game, I believe, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy VII, Tekken 2, Parasite Eve, Donkey Kong 1994, which is the Game Boy version of the arcade game that expands it super hard, and that game has a lot of fans, Sonic 2, and Beyond Oasis. I asked him if he could choose to work on any game franchise, what would he pick? The ones he listed was he hopes to one day work on a Castlevania game, which unfortunately, good luck with that. They'd need to make a new Castlevania game first. A FromSoft game, which I think would be really neat. Dynasty Warriors, Prince of Persia, and, quote, maybe Watch Dogs. I think that at least 2 of those on there, I think Prince of Persia and Watch Dogs, that seems like it should be doable. Give him a call, Ubisoft. Come on, the ball's in your court now. When I do stuff like this where I'm asking, I like to ask, what are some things that you would give as advice to other aspiring game composers who haven't broken into the industry yet? And he says, quote, keep doing your own thing. Constantly do your homework and your research about those that are in the industry that came before you, come in with you, and after you. It will pay off in some capacity. He also advises that you should, quote, test the music in the game engine. I found out very early in my career that it is imperative to implement the music in the game. This will determine if the music loops, fades, works with the animations, mechanics, and mood, which you'd think would be a common sense piece of advice. I've worked on video games. It's not.
For how late in the process music is done, yeah, right.
Yeah. You can follow him on Twitter at Chase Bethea. That's ChaseBethea. And you can also go buy his work on his Bandcamp at chasebethea.bandcamp.com. In terms of his discography, there's a couple of games on here that I recognize the name of. I Can't Escape was, again, one of his first major projects that he worked on that got attention, like Markiplier played that game. That one got some legs. Cubic Climber, Deity Quest, Adventure Lib, which doesn't really come across in vocally, but when you look at the logo, it's Ad Lib Adventure, That's what it's supposed to be. Neat title. Doesn't work when you're saying it. Super Happy Fun block. I Can't Escape Darkness. Reality. The one he is most known for nowadays is the soundtrack to the game Aground. And most recently, last year, he put out the soundtrack for a game called Reclaim Earth. In terms of historical development research for Reality itself, Bethea was on the project from the very beginning due to his, close relationship with the devs. His first priority when they started was to start with the character themes. He says, quote, I did this early because the story was centered around the people and their decisions. Since the characters would be showing up in the story often, it made the most sense for the player to recall what the theme was when the character appeared. So basically, it has to be memorable. You have to be able to associate this theme with that character. One of the biggest challenges that he had, though, was balancing the tech aspects of the plot, being that it's focused around VR technology and stuff like that, with the more mystical aspects of Vitalia and its inhabitants. Like, yeah, it's still a game, ostensibly, but it's a fantasy game, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for that soundtrack to be, completely electronic. He also found it a challenge to score a game that could have so many different endings. The way he describes it is, quote, how do I write for an ending I can't determine? And the answer turns out to be a dynamic music system that would actually add or remove instruments and change certain arrangements based on the decisions that the players have made up to that point.
Interesting.
He also wanted to take this opportunity to experiment with something that he had been thinking about for a while. He wanted to experiment with meshing computer music, so like MIDIs, mostly synths, and he wanted to make sure that those were matched well with live instruments, something that had kind of become a bit of a debate around this time in the game music community, I guess. And he kind of felt that since Reality was a concept that sort of mixed fantasy and technology, this was the perfect time to try it. So he hired live musicians to record, with his overall goal being to feature at least one live instrument per track. And when approaching writing the themes for the various major characters, he basically sat down and studied the GDD, which stands for Game Design Document, which is basically a log of everything in the game, etc., just so the information's all in one spot. And he decided to figure out their various individual qualities so that he could then use this as sort of a base to assign what he calls anchor instruments to them that would fit their mannerisms and personalities, essentially. And I think it came out very interestingly. And you can hear how interestingly it turned out. You nailed it, Joe, on the 5 critical tracks for Reality. So let's go ahead and jump on into those. The first one is Facts of Existence main theme. This is the title screen / main menu music of the game, according to Chase Bethea. I have quotes for every track because I just sent him the list and was like, can you tell me anything about these songs? For this one, he says, quote, setting the tone for the game, solidifying the theme. I hired a cellist to begin toying with the idea of real life versus virtual reality. This is scored for the game demo and stuck for the full game. And I think that it really, really pulls off its job of setting the tone super well. I really like the sort of rumbling bass synths, and I think accompanied by the cello, it's just kind of neat. It's really, really cool and sounds very sort of cyber, if that makes sense.
You know what this kind of makes me think of? It makes you think of it's like a theme from an anime or something like that aired on Toonami in the mid 2000s. It kind of gives me that kind of vibe, and I really dig it. I also appreciate like when you're talking about how like he's blending the synths with real instruments, and it's like that kind of dichotomy of like, you know, real people, but they're dealing with, you know, a VR virtual world. Like that's the perfect way to represent it. That's real cool.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of this one. For Critical Track number 2, let's talk about one of the main character's themes. This is Theme of Lilia. Chase says, quote, "This was a rewrite. The Lilia theme that was approved is actually a college piece I wrote during my private composition lesson. I rearranged it to fit the palette of reality and played guitar on it." It says, in parentheses, "I am not a guitarist." You could have fooled me. You could have fooled me, honestly. The first theme of Lilia that I pitched was originally written on the piano and then arranged in the Cubase, which is the DAW he was using, essentially, which digital audio workstation basically means program you use to edit audio or record audio, essentially. It was raining that night, and I was very depressed and thinking about quitting game audio. Although the piece fit some of Lilia's personality, it didn't fit her entirely, so it was reused elsewhere in the game, and I renamed it Cyber Paradise, where it works much nicer for a story scene in the game. I think that's like a really interesting story of like that particular song being composed at like a relatively low point, it sounds like. Obviously that piece did not make it onto the Critical 5, unfortunately, but I do remember hearing that song, and it was very good, honestly. But I like this version because I think I'm going to try and be as metaphorical as I can. It's got this kind of surreal feeling to it. To me, it sort of feels like you can hear Lilia's frustration because like she's stuck in a rut currently in life. And there are a few moments of like sort of this tonal dissonance at certain points that I personally take to sort of represent her issues in her home life and her frustrations with how she is interacting with her family and stuff like that. I think this theme works really well for Lilia in general.
The vibe I get from this one is like Masafumi Takada in Danganronpa. I could see this like fitting in that, like kind of have that, you know, right, the dissonant kind of low-key surreal tone that could fit in another visual novel game, you know, Danganronpa. Yeah.
I could hear that. I could definitely hear this being in like one of those sort of a song that would play when you're exploring the new parts that opened up after a trial, etc.
Yes.
Following that, let's do Critical Track number 3. It is Interments. So Interments is the company owned by Jacob Lassard that is developing the Penta. Obviously, this is the company's theme. Quote, "Interments was interesting. I played guitar and live piano on this. I also hired a bassist for it. I scored this to be the sound world of Jacob's new VR MMO that he designed. Essentially, this song is supposed to represent the Vitalia and Penta projects. First of all, like you said in the last track that we talked about, you said you're not a guitarist. You played guitar on this one too. You're a guitarist. Trust me. It sounds good. I would not believe you were an amateur unless you told me that. So I disagree that you are. I really think that, especially at the very beginning, this song makes some good use of that bassist. Because the beginning of the song, the intro, is this really, really funky part and then turns more into this sort of more techie piano piece. And I really actually, for the most part, my favorite part of this song is the percussion. I think the drum loops are really neat, and they're sort of processed in this interesting way, and they're panned, so they're all coming from different directions, and it works really well and definitely holds your interest while you're listening.
Well, especially if you're representing a VR world and it's supposed to be like 360 around you, right? So I want to know what that instrument is that's going like, I've never heard anything like that. And I think that makes it stand out as its own piece. That's really neat.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other main playable character's theme with critical track number 4. This is Theme of Jacob. Chase says, quote, I knew I had to make this piece feel arrogant, cocky, and everything else that Jacob's attitude was about. I wanted his theme to be related to Interments, but in a different instrumental form. Jacob felt he was cool because of the cutting-edge technology he made, and so when the song shifts, I try to exhibit that musically with a different vibe. I really like this song. It's very, very techy. And I think it does pull off the idea of a cocky attitude. I guess more arrogant. Because, I don't know, I personally don't know if I'd describe Jacob as cocky. Because while he does put up a confident sort of thing, he's not really like bragging about it, honestly. But like he has kind of in his own mind earned the right to be arrogant because dude made the most advanced VR technology and VR MMO of all time in world. And he's going to make sure that you know it. And he did it by himself for the most part, outside of a couple members of Interments. I think this song really sort of fits that. It's more really interesting use of percussion, I think. And I think it's pretty good.
I love that shift there. As you mentioned, you can definitely hear it in the clip. And it's just a really different kind of pace to it, but then it kind of goes right back into this high synth that, again, I don't think I've ever heard an instrument quite like this before. So it's really interesting when you're talking about like using like those synths to represent this world, and it does a great job of portraying the space you're trying to represent. This is really interesting, just learning a lot of different things here about like what kind of synths you can play around with, but also mashing it up with real instruments. I really dig that.
All right, let's get to the final critical track. It's critical track number 5, Knowledge of the Ancients. As far as I remember, this song is mostly used when you're learning about bits of the lore behind Vitalia, like the history and all that of the world. Chase says, quote, I had a lot of fun with this. I listened to the reference given to me by Fancy Fish and eventually came up with this smooth ostinato and built it around that. I hired my talented composer friend, Lauren Pham, who has a tremendously beautiful and unique voice. This song has actually legitimately 100% been stuck in my head for several weeks. It's such a simple melody, but it's so catchy. And I've just found myself like humming it, just over and over again. Free me from this prison you've built for me, Mr. Bethea, please, I beg of you. But I really, really dig the very mystical feeling this song has. It sort of steps away from the synths and stuff because now you're learning about the lore of this fantasy world, essentially. And it has a few different forms that it changes between throughout the song, adding different instruments to sort of change up the tone a bit. I don't know. I think this is my favorite song in the game, weirdly enough.
I think it's mine too. I can definitely imagine myself like listening to this on loop while I do some reading or something like that. And yeah, the voice is just a nice splash here, like mixing that in with a real performance there to support, ancient lore. Fantastic.
So for tracks on the cutting room floor, I got a couple. The first is, I had to put this somewhere. It almost ended up on the Critical 5. Just barely didn't make it. It is Mainframe, Realms theme. This is the song that represents the MMORPG Full Realms that Lilia plays, and essentially plays whenever she's sort of talking to her party in the game. Chase says, quote, the craziest track, in my opinion. Writing for the VR game that Lilia thrived in, I played live alto saxophone, damn, and hired a trumpet player to thicken the texture. Here is where I challenged myself to use many layers of synths and live instruments together. Essentially, I was writing for the VR MMO game inside a game, and I think he nailed it. Honestly, this is such a very memorable piece, and it does sound like something you'd hear in an RPG, like of that kind. I think it's a really interesting track, and I had to include it somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Blending those virtual and real instruments. So good. Alto sax players unite. Respect on that one. And I think that's got to be so interesting when you're trying to think like that meta, that layered, and then you're trying to write for that. The percussion on this one is the craziest part, I think. It's intense, but in not an overbearing way. I think like all the instruments are really well blended, but the pace and the kind of hectic nature on those drums, it's impressive.
It's a very heroic sounding piece.
The melody, yes, for sure. Yeah.
And the other track on the cutting room floor, which I actually got a lot more of a story on it than I thought I would. It's Theme of Kumori. So, according to Chase, quote, the most rewrites I've ever had to do for a game project. 5 in total. This was the first game that, quote, or as he says, temporary placeholder music, my music as a reference from a different game. This track was very hard to get right. I think I fell victim of battling myself on another level, because the developers were expecting a very certain sound that they loved that I produced for an entirely different project. By the third rewrite, I was told my music from Adventure Lib, which was also developed by Fancy Fish Games, The Dungeon Below, was used as, quote, temp. So after multiple listens to the two references and my music, I added chimes, bells, and subtracted more from the piece I arranged and orchestrated with a sharper ear. On rewrite 4, I added an arpeggio synth in the C section. Finally, it hit me. Maybe the piece was too fast, so I changed the tempo from 86 BPM to 83 BPM and added a recorder flute. This was rewrite number 5, and then the piece was approved. The tempo change and adding the flute kind of matched the sound of my track The Dungeon Below, and they really wanted it to be the same. He also, in a separate part of the email he sent me back, he was talking about how he approached the themes of Lilia, Jacob, Ben, and Kumori. And for Kumori, he said it's not his favorite, and that's, quote, probably because I'm not a big fan of cats. And Komori's a big cat, so yeah. 5 rewrites.
And just fascinating to hear the story behind it, right? Like just all that they go through, how they put in those temporary placeholders, how you're trying to match those expectations, what you got to do for that. That's so cool to hear that kind of story. I really appreciate him, getting back to you and sharing that with us. That's fantastic. Also, Chase, where do you get your instruments? I don't know if it's going to be in the clip, but like at the end of this like I am fascinated to hear just like all these different kinds of synths that I've never heard before in a game in this soundtrack. So cool.
Honestly, this soundtrack has a lot of unique sounds that, I don't think I've heard elsewhere. It's really cool and impressive. So what will I never forget about Reality? I mean, I played it for the first time like a month ago. Less than that, actually. I think it's a neat little visual novel. It's got multiple endings, which means it's got some good replay value to it. Characters in the world are extremely interesting. I really like Lilia as a character. Jacob, I'm a bit lukewarm on. He's fine, I guess. Ben is an interesting character to see interact with the world. And then Kumori is a big cat. And I'm fine with cats, personally. I have one sleeping right outside my door right now. That one's a jerk. Kumori's not so much a jerk. I would say that if anything in this episode has sort of made this game sound interesting to you, you should check it out. It's I think, worth your time.
I am definitely tempted, but I think, most of all, in addition to the great soundtrack work, thanks again, Chase Bethea. Really appreciate that. And getting back to Joe there. But just, great music to go with a visual novel. It's not only appealing there, but I think narratively, when you're talking about like kind of telling you the ramifications of what your decision will make. Because it's tough to tell from like just a few words from the prompt. Like, how is it going to play out? Is it what you want? You kind of want some more insight in the role playing there of what you want your intentions and actions to kind of carry out. So I think that's the neatest part of it that makes me want to try it.
Yeah, I think you would dig it. I think you'd enjoy it personally. So for our transition, usually we highlight a fan cover, a fan remix. Surprise, there's none for this game. Unfortunate. I think people should take a look at this game and crank out some covers of some of these songs. I think some people would do really well with them. But as we do usually when this is the case, I went ahead and just picked another track from the game to sort of be our transition. And I figured, hey, you know what? What fits more than epilogue, the music that plays during the epilogue? So please enjoy that, and we will be right back. All
right, our next game, we go from a game that I don't think many people have heard of, to a game that I think many people have heard of. Let's talk about Sonic 3 and Knuckles. We've talked about Sonic quite a lot on this show, especially recently. I didn't realize how frequently recently, but quite a bit. So in episode 9, we talked about Sonic the Hedgehog 2. In episode 17, Sonic Adventure 2. In episode 76, we talked about Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Episode 106, Sonic Mania. Episode 116, Sonic R. And then recently we had that Sonic episode with Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations. That was in episode 137.
Where we accidentally summoned Colors being bad.
Oops. But now we talk about one of the best games in the series, and it's a combo deal. It's Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles combined into Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was released in North America for the Sega Genesis on February 2nd, 1994. Wow, that was almost to the day of when we're recording this. That's wild. It was released for Mega Drive in Europe on February 24th, 1994. Australia got the game in March, and then Japan on May 27th, 1994. Sonic and Knuckles released worldwide for the same Sega platform on October 18th, 1994. So, depending on where you lived, that was 8 months or 5 months later, you get another game releasing on Genesis or Mega Drive. But there'll be a story to that, and of course, that's one of the big things about this game. So, Sonic 3 and Knuckles would be re-released on Sega Saturn in 1997, PC in 1997, 2002 on GameCube, 2004 on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC, 2007 for Wii Virtual Console, 2009 for Xbox 360 and PS3, and Nintendo DS in 2010. The game is developed by Sega Technical Institute, or also known as STI, and this is the American Development Division of Sega that was founded by Mark Cerny, who is now known today as the lead designer of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5.
What an unfortunate name for a sub studio.
Yes, but at the time that was known as STD. So
okay, okay, so it's only retroactively not very great.
Yes, yeah. Or at least that's how I learned it in school, me being older. The game is published by Sega. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is a 2D side-scrolling platformer. You run and jump quickly, collect rings, defeat enemies along the way, and then you beat the boss at the end of the stage. It plays a lot like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, except one of the biggest additions is the addition of shield items that allow the player to either breathe underwater, withstand fire from enemy projectiles, or attract nearby rings.
Were those not in 2?
They're not.
Oh, why do I have like weird Mandela effect memories of them being in 2?
I wonder if like it got patched into some, or maybe you're thinking Mania? Like Mania brought...
No, because I haven't played Mania. 2 is the only classic Sonic game I've played. I'm pretty sure I might just be Mandela affecting.
Maybe, because yeah, those shields were 3 for sure. You can also clear special stages to collect 7 Chaos Emeralds, which allow you to become an invincible super form, and this helps you get the game's best ending. Also, this game features different playable characters that can do different things. Sonic moves the fastest, and he can also do like a small spin attack in the air. Tails can fly in the air or swim underwater, and he can also be player 2, that you plug that controller into a second port, and you can kind of help carry Sonic to new places as player 2. And Knuckles can glide and climb up vertical walls with some wall breaking thrown in there as well. Also, the game has like 6 save slots, which I know, games were at this time like starting to make use of saving period, but multiple save slots. That's pretty neat.
That's something. Pokemon wouldn't even get for 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So the story of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, we're just going to take from Wikipedia to try to summarize it the quickest you can. Quote, after Sonic and Tails defeat Dr. Robotnik in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Robotnik's space station, the Death Egg, crash lands on the floating Angel Island. There, Robotnik meets Knuckles the Echidna, the last member of an ancient Echidna civilization that once inhabited the island. Knuckles is the guardian of the Master Emerald, which grants the island its levitation power. Robotnik dupes Knuckles into believing Sonic is trying to steal the Master Emerald, turning the two against each other while he repairs the Death Egg. Sonic and Tails approach Angel Island in their biplane, the Tornado. Sonic uses the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic, but Knuckles ambushes him and steals the emeralds. Now, for Sonic and Knuckles, I guess it takes place after Sonic's story, and Knuckles is relaxing, but then he's attacked by Egg Robo, one of Robotnik's robots. So, for Sonic, his big question in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is, can Sonic get the Chaos Emeralds back from Knuckles and stop Robotnik's Death Egg from being rebuilt? Meanwhile, can Knuckles stop Mecha Sonic from using the power of the Master Emerald? So, Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Sonic 3 and Knuckles?
As I alluded to earlier, I've never played it.
That's wild to me.
Well, I can't say I've never played it because I've played bits and pieces. I just wasn't a Sega person growing up. I had a friend who was really into Sega and had like the Gems collection, and they had a Dreamcast and all that. I can't say that I have played a substantial amount of Sonic 3. Obviously, I'm sort of familiar with the soundtrack simply because, it's a classic Sonic soundtrack. They're all bangers. But yeah, I don't have a huge amount of experience with this one.
I mean, yeah, sure. Outside of levels you may have played, remade in games like Sonic Generations and things like that, right? I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Sonic 2 was like the first video game I ever really remember playing on a console. I mean, granted, there were like, PC games and whatnot, but Sonic 2 was like kind of a foundational thing where I'd go over to an aunt and uncle's house for holidays and they'd have Sonic 2 and it's right there. But then, when Sonic 3 came out on PC in 1997, and it was like the Sonic and Knuckles collection, I think is how it was branded. And I was like, oh yeah, I love that. I want to get that. It's a Sonic game. I like that. And the PC I had couldn't run it, which I think says something that like in 1997, the average PC even had like a graphics card in it. Something like the game would not run well or it would hard crash or things like that. And that was one of my first big frustrations with like not getting a PC game to work is that Sonic 3 and Knuckles port to PC in 97. I remember like getting it at like a Office Max or an Office Depot, weirdly enough. Weird correlations there. Anyway, I would eventually learn and play and appreciate Sonic 3 and Knuckles with the Sonic Mega Collection on GameCube when I had that as the first console I owned. So definitely enjoyed playing the game there and beating it. And I think I actually remember playing Sonic and Knuckles at that same aunt and uncle's house, but like never like the Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined. So it's an interesting, weird history with me in this game, one I appreciate. But yeah, like a lot of memories, certain things like the Carnival Night Zone. Like there's a big frustrating sticking point where you're on cylinders that go up and down.
Yeah, I've heard talk of this.
Yeah, and so like you're thinking with the game's physics is like, if I jump on it, I'll come back down and it'll get me low enough that I can like kind of slip out under this gap. And no, like literally to a point where I guess at the time Sega had to make like some big push of like, no, you have to like, while you're standing on the cylinder, like hold up and down, like as it rocks back and forth. It's not like as you'd expect the jump physics to work.
Surely playtesters like had the same issue.
Yeah.
Like that couldn't have been something that just all of the playtesters just happened to not have a problem with.
I don't know, I guess, but like it was a thing, and I remember struggling with that early on and having to look it up, and oh man, crazy times. But yeah, what a great game. What a great game. And certainly famous for being one of the big video game music legends, stories, as it were. We'll get to it. This is going to be a big historical development research section here, if you couldn't have guessed. So let's talk about the development of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. After the completion of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, STI, which is based out of California, they split into two teams. One was comprised of Japanese developers who worked on Sonic 3, and the other of Americans, and they worked on Sonic Spinball.
Yeah.
The divvying up of work there. Development began in January 1993 with a deadline of February 1994. So a little more than a year. And this is because Sega and McDonald's had worked out a partnership where McDonald's would have this big promotional campaign in America for the game. So initially, the team used Sega's new Virtua processor chip that allowed for 3D graphics. And they created a prototype with isometric graphics under the working title Sonic 3D. It makes sense. It's the third game in the series. 3D is kind of on the horizon. 3D. And their prototype included an original special stage that featured a polygonal Sonic in a figure-8 shaped stage. When it would become apparent that working with this new technology would take a while and the game would not be finished by 1994, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was restarted as a more conventional 2D platform game. Oddly enough, if you're wondering about this isometric concept and why does it sound familiar, it was eventually used for Sonic 3D Blast in 1996 on Sega Saturn. So the team wanted a bigger story and bigger levels. The levels are about 3 times the size of the ones found in Sonic 2. But in fact, the planned scope of the game was so big, the games that we know today as Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles were originally planned to be one whole game. But to fit everything on one cartridge, the memory that would have been needed to make that happen would have made the game prohibitively expensive. So between that technical hurdle coming up and the upcoming McDonald's promotion, Sega split the game into 2 releases and developed what they called lock-on technology. See, Sonic and Knuckles released as a cartridge that had the bits that you'd put in your Genesis, your Mega Drive, what have you. But for those that remember, also had some of those kind of bits on top, the female parts to the male parts to put in the system, as it were. So male on the bottom, female on top. Because you could just put Sonic and Knuckles in your Genesis, your Mega Drive, and play a game on its own. It's Knuckles as the playable character. He has his own levels. But its design meant that you could lock on or stack a cartridge on top of it. And doing so, with Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on top of Sonic and Knuckles, would allow Sonic and Tails to become playable in Knuckles' levels, while Knuckles could also play Sonic and Tails' levels, and thus Sonic 3 and Knuckles as a combo package was born. While there's still, you could stack Sonic the Hedgehog 2 onto Sonic and Knuckles and play Knuckles in Sonic 2.
That's the wildest one for me. That's the wildest part.
It's insane. I don't know of like a proper comparison to make today because of just like the weird physical manifestation of that. But I guess it even carried over like in an Xbox 360 version of it. Like if you bought Sonic 2 and Sonic and Knuckles or Sonic 3 and Knuckles, like you could make that happen because the Xbox 360 or Xbox Live account would recognize that you had both and it gave you the ability, unlocked it to do that. Like that's just crazy. So people at Sega said that they like experimented with making that work for Sonic the Hedgehog, but like it was just too far back, and that makes sense. Like Sonic the Hedgehog, a very different game compared to Sonic 2 and 3. So the character of Knuckles is new for this game, and certainly he would carry over into the future of the Sonic franchise. As far as designing this new character, Knuckles symbolizes power, and the emphasis of the character was to break walls. The colors of his shoes were meant to be inspired by the Jamaican flag, and his original name for the character was Dreads, Dreds, referring to his dreadlocks. Does the Jamaican connection make sense? Okay, it should now.
Yeah, it's a good thing that was not the name they went with.
Yep. The design was tested, though, with focus groups of American children, so testing it there as opposed to there and Japan. So, I don't know, interesting. The game reviewed very well, with a Game Rankings aggregate average of 89%. Computer and Video Games magazine called Sonic 3 and Knuckles, quote, the best platform experience ever, and what video games were invented for. It's generally regarded as the best game in the series, but if anything, it was critiqued for not innovating too much off of Sonic 2. And when you think of the development struggles it went through and how they had to pivot, it's like, suddenly make a 2D game like we're used to. It's not surprising that they didn't have time to innovate all that much. So yeah, overall, you could say that Sonic 3's development was troubled, not only for the deadlines with McDonald's and the game splitting, but apparently over in Japan, Sega kept pestering STI for updates. And there was apparently also jealousy inside STI from the Sonic Spinball team of why was Sonic 3 taking more priority for resources.
I can't imagine.
Maybe one of these games is a spin-off. So Sega spent $20 million on marketing Sonic the Hedgehog 3, while Sonic & Knuckles was backed by a $45 million marketing campaign. Probably a lot of that to do with you can stack the games on top of each other. At the time, though, video games only had a marketing budget of usually about $5 million. So Sega put a bunch more money into this, and they had like competitions and partnerships and deals with like MTV and Blockbuster and a video game tournament and all that. It was a whole thing. Sonic 3 and Knuckles sold a combined 4 million copies worldwide, making the combo the fourth best-selling Genesis game. If you're curious about the order, apparently it's Sonic the Hedgehog, because it was bundled with a whole bunch of Genesises and Mega Drives, then Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and then Aladdin. Disney's Aladdin on Genesis, and then Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Okay.
Because it was 1994, awards were a funny thing then and not really noted as being a big thing, but it's generally regarded these days as one of the best Sega Genesis games. What is the game's legacy? Well, it introduced Knuckles. That's a pretty big deal. Angel Island Zone and Hydro City Zone were featured in Sonic Mania. And then from Sonic & Knuckles, there was Sky Sanctuary in Sonic Generations on console. And then Mushroom Hill was part of Sonic Generations on 3DS. Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles are reportedly set to be re-released for the first time since 2011 as part of the Sonic Origins compilation in 2022. We still have yet to hear more about that. It was kind of mentioned last year as like, we're planning on doing this because, hey, we like to, re-release, classic games. That seems to be the thing. Use the name Origins in there. So we'll see what happens if that releases in 2022 here. And the Origins versions will apparently be the first re-releases of the games in widescreen. So that's pretty neat. But Sonic 3 has been re-released less frequently over the last dozen years or so, including Sega turning down a mobile remaster concept in 2014, as well as not including the game in 2019's Sega Genesis mini console. But that's likely due to music legal complications, shall we say, with the estate of the composer that we're going to talk about this week. It's time to talk about Michael Jackson. Yes, the famous story with Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is that Michael Jackson had a hand in composing the music. It's a story. We'll get to it. But let's talk about Michael Jackson, who was born on August 29th, 1958 in Gary, Indiana. How do you summarize Michael Jackson?
Oh, just one of the most influential musical artists ever.
Yeah, so Wikipedia put it as, quote, dubbed the King of Pop, he is regarded as one of the most significant cultural figures of the 20th century. Over a 4-decade career, his contributions to music, dance, and fashion, along with his publicized personal life, made him a global figure in popular culture. Jackson influenced artists across many music genres through stage and video performances. He popularized complicated dance moves such as the moonwalk, to which he gave the name, as well as the robot. He is the most awarded music artist in history. Yeah, that's a pretty decent job there, Wikipedia. Thank you. So Michael Jackson was influenced by musicians, including James Brown, Little Richard, Jackie Wilson, Diana Ross, Fred Astaire, Sammy Davis Jr., Gene Kelly, and David Ruffin. Apparently James Brown had the biggest impact when he was young, Little Richard too, but Diana Ross kind of helped him get him into Motown and the industry there. So interesting connections there, because as the 8th child of the Jackson family, Michael Jackson made his professional debut in 1964 with his elder brothers Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and Marlon as a member of the Jackson 5, and they'd later be known as the Jacksons. But my goodness, what a group to start with, and with songs like ABC and things like that. Just a classic group there. And then Michael Jackson began his solo career in 1971 at age 13. But he would really break out as a star in 1979 with his album Off the Wall. And then 1982's Thriller took things to new heights, becoming the best-selling album of all time, which still has to be topped to this day at claimed sales of over 70 million copies. For what it's worth, AC/DC's Back in Black is supposedly the next closest at 50 million. Michael Jackson pushed the art of music videos and what a music video could be, especially with the release of the video for the Thriller single in 1983. Thriller was a 14-minute short film that, quote, defined music videos and broke racial barriers, end quote, on MTV, which launched 2 years earlier. In December 2009, the Library of Congress selected Thriller as the only music video to be preserved in the National Film Registry, calling it a work of enduring importance to American culture. The Super Bowl is coming up this Sunday as when you're listening, so found it interesting that in January 1993, Michael Jackson performed at the Super Bowl 27 halftime show in Pasadena, California. This was at a time when the NFL sought a big-name artist to keep ratings high during halftime, especially following dwindling audience figures. It was the first Super Bowl whose halftime performance drew greater audience figures than the game itself. So found that to be interesting. Watching a bit of it, it's like the big theatrics that he does, and it's that kind of really kicked off what we know as the Super Bowl halftime show today. Just interesting there. Couple things we have to discuss with Michael Jackson, though, just as far as how he is viewed today. First of all, Michael Jackson died of cardiac arrest as a result of a drug overdose in June 2009. I remember that being one of these megaton big celebrity death moments, especially when word of it first started on the internet.
I actually legitimately know exactly where I was when I found out.
I do too.
I was on vacation with my family in Washington, D.C., and a homeless man was shouting about how Michael Jackson was dead. And then we saw the news.
Oh my God.
That's how we found out that Michael Jackson was dead.
I mean, I was in my apartment in Ann Arbor my junior year, and I was end of junior year, but yeah, seeing it break on the internet and TMZ, and that was kind of at a time where like, oh, I don't know, TMZ, but like they had that scoop, man. And wow, that was a big one. It turns out his personal physician, Conrad Murray, was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in 2011 after he applied a massive amount of the general anesthetic propofol. So I did not remember that was like the result of that it was involuntary manslaughter. Also, we can't avoid that Michael Jackson was a very controversial public figure, especially due to allegations of child sexual abuse that started in 1993, with some cases that were even brought up posthumously. Granted, he's never been convicted, but it's one of those big court of public opinion things, especially with like documentaries that are out there and swaying people's versions and how they see the events that are represented in those documentaries. So we'll leave it at that. It's, Michael Jackson, a figure not without controversy, as we'll see applied to the story of his involvement with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Interestingly, Michael Jackson had no formal music training, and he could not read or write music notation. He's credited for playing guitar, keyboard, and drums on some of his music work, but he wasn't proficient in them. If anything, when composing, he recorded ideas by beatboxing or imitating instruments vocally into a tape recorder. But, I mean, obviously it worked. He's a creative genius. Was a creative genius, should say. And Michael Jackson is one of the best-selling music artists of all time, with estimated sales of over 400 million records worldwide. He had 13 Billboard Hot 100 number one singles, which is more than any other male artist in the Hot 100 era. And he was the first artist to have a top 10 single in the Billboard Hot 100 in 5 different decades. Yes, that even continued to the 2010s, when he had Never Felt So Good with Justin Timberlake, released posthumously. In 2020, Forbes magazine recognized Jackson as the top-earning dead celebrity each year since his death, except 2012, with the highest-grossing year ever for someone who's deceased being in 2016, with the Jackson estate earning $825 million.
Damn.
Which must have been selling off a lot of things. For what it's worth, his favorite film was 1961's West Side Story. The discography of Michael Jackson, I mean, there were 10 studio albums, 3 soundtrack albums, 1 live album, 39 compilation albums, 2 posthumous albums, 10 video albums, and 8 remix albums. But as far as video games go, there is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. There's also his involvement with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. He was part of Space Channel 5, both Part 1 and 2. Did not know that.
I also did not know that.
And there was a video game after his death called Michael Jackson The Experience. And it was with a lot of the motion-controlled consoles. So, I mean, Wii, PlayStation Move, Kinect, a dance like Michael, essentially, was that game. There was also a game called Planet Michael that was a planned MMORPG based on Jackson's music. It was scheduled for release in 2011, but was canceled. Never heard of this ever.
Yeah, me neither.
Probably a good thing it didn't come out.
Yeah.
So the historical development research to Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles is a complicated one. And let's give a shout out here to the D-Pad over on YouTube. In 2016, they made a video called A Brief History of Michael Jackson's Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Which I think was a good way of kind of distilling years of internet history about learning about this story. So it goes something like this. See, Michael Jackson made this film in 1988 called Moonwalker, which instead of a continuous plot, it expresses the influence of fandom and innocence through a collection of short films about Michael Jackson, several of which are just long-form music videos from Jackson's album Bad. Now, there were a few video game adaptations of this, like in arcades and like that, but none were more famous, for better or worse, than the one released in 1990 for Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. And so Michael Jackson had this collaboration with Sega, and reportedly he's a big fan of 1992's Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Meanwhile, over at Sega, Masato Nakamura, who we covered for his work on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and he's the composer of the first two Sonic games, he wanted more money to work on the next game in the Sonic series and also be paid more for the work he had already done. And Sega's like, no, not going to do that. Suddenly, there's a need for a music director on the next Sonic project. And so while he's on tour, Michael Jackson supposedly stops by Sega Technical Institute, and someone lets it slip that they're looking for someone to direct the music for Sonic 3. And so being the big fan he is, Jackson supposedly accepts the offer and brings his collaborators along, like keyboardist Brad Buxer. Let's put a pin in that name. We'll bring back Brad Buxer in a bit. And this was not known or confirmed for a long time, as people were starting to chat more on fan forums and really embracing a big booming internet culture in the early to mid 2000s. People on Sonic fan forums were pointing out similarities and speculating about, this music in Sonic 3 kind of sounds similar to some Michael Jackson music. And so they pointed out similarities like Carnival Night Zone to the song Jam, Ice Cap Zone to, either Who Is It or Smooth Criminal, and the credits theme to Stranger in Moscow. But a 2005 interview with Roger Hector, who was an executive producer on Sonic 3 at STI, confirmed that they had brought Michael Jackson in to compose music. But when the child sex abuse charges were brought against him in 1993, his contract was terminated, and the content was allegedly stripped from the game, and he went uncredited. The Sonic and Knuckles Collection PC port in 1997, remember I mentioned that one and you couldn't get the game to work and it was so frustrating, it changed the music to the stages Carnival Night, Ice Cap, and Launch Bass. For what it's worth, if you want to listen to them, they sound terrible, especially if you're used to like the classic Sonic themes. It's like, what the heck is going on? So a lot of people were pointing at it like, oh yeah, isn't that interesting? That's so weird. But it actually may be a red herring because it's actually pretty likely that the PC port was using MIDIs on computer and it couldn't replicate some of the sound effects like the go in Launch Base Zone, and there's like a jam sound effect in Carnival Night. So it couldn't really replicate those like it had done on Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. So maybe kind of a red herring there. But then it was a YouTuber named Qjimbo who posted a video kind of collating all these things together in 2006 called, I believe it was Michael Jackson's Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Michael Jackson's Sonic 3. The internet lost their collective minds. See, this is like at the beginning of YouTube, and this video blew up. This 2016 video from the D-Pad, though, notes how there was also some stuff with a musician named C. Sirocco Jones, who is credited in Sonic 3 as Shirocco, and how this guy noted on his website that he worked on a song called The Water with Michael Jackson, and he credited as level 2 and 3 from Sonic the Hedgehog 3, even confirming in email correspondence that he had the original recordings of Jackson humming the melody, And then later this information would be scrubbed from his website.
Ah, sounds like lawyers.
Yeah, got involved there. Fans then also noticed more similarities, like between the credits theme and the final boss theme. And that final boss theme would also be carried over into Sonic and Knuckles. So it's like Jackson's work possibly carried over into that game as well as the Knuckles' theme, the drum loop theme from Sonic 3, being similar to the song Blood on the Dance Floor, which was a song that was like written in 1991, but wouldn't be released until 1997. And then also that the glass sound effect, the glass shattering sound effect in Carnival Night Zone is also the same as the one as In the Closet, just pitch shifted or time stretched a little bit. In February 2009, Sega released Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection. I believe it was on Xbox 360 and PS3. And in that game, it included trivia straight from Sega that Michael Jackson was originally going to compose the score for the game. Did you know that? And that's coming straight from Sega. So kind of confirming at least a part of what fans were starting to suspect. Later in 2009, though, a French magazine interviewed Brad Buxer. There's that name again. He's the keyboardist that collaborated with Michael Jackson. And Buxer suggested that Jackson actually removed his credit intentionally after being unhappy with the sound quality of the Genesis's Yamaha YM2612 sound chip. Not in the sense that like it was bad or whatever. It just wasn't replicating his music, his sound the way he wanted it to. Buxer also confirmed that the credits theme was the basis for the song that he and Jackson wrote together, Stranger in Moscow. And that was like the closest they had worked together. So like definitely connecting the dots there officially. Speaking of Buxer though, in 2013, it was revealed that Ice Cap Zone was really derived from a previously unreleased 1982 track called Hard Times by a band called The Jetsons. Jetzons.
So not George.
Not George and Jane and his boy Elroy, daughter Judy. Who is the main songwriter in that band? Oh, that's right. It's Brad Buxer. And when you listen to this track that wouldn't even be released until it was like in a complete Jetsons collection in 2008. So like we didn't even hear the track until then. But once you hear this song Hard Times, it's like, oh yeah, this is super obviously the inspiration for Ice Cap Zone.
I can see you got better things to do, so just take your things and leave. Hard times gone by. Hard times gone by.
Some fans were incorrect there on what Ice Cap's origins were, but the rest of it was wow. Like it's making some good dots and connections there. So basically the short of this whole story is that like Michael Jackson is brought in to contribute and compose music for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And it's kind of a combo deal, if you were to kind of bring in like the McDonald's analogy of Jackson being unhappy with the Genesis' sound quality, but he didn't want to stop all the work. He encouraged his team to continue the work as he started to kind of distance himself from the project. But then the child abuse allegations came in, and so it was kind of a way for Sega to cut the cord there. So it kind of seems to be a combo deal there. So yeah, when we talk about who did composition work or music work on the soundtrack, it seems to be Michael Jackson, along with his team of keyboardist Brad Buxer, engineer Bobby Brooks, sound designer Daryl Ross, orchestrator Jeff Grace, bassist Doug Grigsby III, and producer C. Sirocco Jones. Now, the first 5 of those 6 members of his team would also be credited on Jackson's next album, And that'd be His Story, Past, Present, and Future, Book 1, released in 1995. And that was kind of where a lot of people had started, like, who were these people in the Sonic 3 credits? Oh, a lot of them work with Michael Jackson in such close proximity after Sonic 3. So then we bring in Howard Drawson, who was the composer for 1993's Sonic Spinball, you know, the other half of STI there. He's brought in to do cleanup work for the game, to try kind of strip away what he could of Jackson's work. And he's credited in the game as special thanks. But see, he actually said in an interview that when he was brought on, he actually thought he was expecting to do work with Michael Jackson. The Sega sound team at the time consisted of Tokuhiko Uwabo, Sachio Ogawa, Yoshiaki Kashima, Masaru Setsumaru, Tatsuyuki Maeda, Tomonori Sawada, Masayuki Nagao, and Jun Senoue.
I know that guy.
Yeah, we know that guy. In fact, in 2010, Senoue said that he knew about Jackson's involvement in Sonic 3, but was not allowed to discuss it. One more neat factoid about this game. Sonic co-creator Naoto Oshima said that Jackson recorded an a cappella demo tape for the game, but that Sega was unable to use the compositions due to the allegations, adding that Sega probably still had the demo tape. Can you imagine Michael Jackson singing these songs that he's composing for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is coming up with it, and that's out there somewhere.
We're never going to hear it.
That could be paired with Sonic 3. Of course we're never going to hear it, but just the fact to imagine that exists is just crazy.
There's probably a nightmare web of NDAs and contracts that will keep that buried forever.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think the fact that people have dug as they have and people have revealed little tidbits as they have, I feel like the fact that we've even known this much about what is seemingly one of video games' greatest music secrets in a way, I think is remarkable. So let's get to the 5 critical tracks for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And we'll start with the first one here. This is Angel Island Zone. Ah, yes, a very notable song from this game. You'll note in the video version of the podcast, we have the tracks from this game credited to Sega Sound Team because it is generally not known or assigned who did what. There's no soundtrack release, so we can't specifically pin specific credits. So it's just it gets the swath of Sega Sound Team for this one, alas. But Angel Island Zone here is just a simply amazing first level theme. I think it does a wonderful job of using the Genesis instruments that are available. Now, granted, Michael Jackson may not have been happy with the sound quality, but it is what it was at the time, especially for a 16-bit console that launched in 1991. These instruments are just so good and well used here, I think, to capture this bright tropical feel for this opening level. And then, of course, you take that foundation, and then Jun Senoue does an amazing remix for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, where that take on Angel Island Zone is incredible. But the original, a classic and so good.
I heard this song for the first time, I'm pretty sure, from the Brawl remix. Which is one of the best remixes in that game. But overall, it's not my favorite. It's very close second. But I actually do have a favorite that's in the Critical 5. So, yeah. because I heard it elsewhere at some point. I don't remember where. But yeah, no, this is like slam dunk, one of the best songs in the game in general.
Absolutely. Had to be here for sure. When we get to number 2 on the Critical 5, though, this is Act 2 Boss. The boss theme that is so good that it carries over not only throughout Sonic the Hedgehog 3, but it's also the Act 2 boss theme for Sonic and Knuckles. So you're hearing this one a lot, and it's paired with some of the most memorable boss themes in those games. And wow, I think it is the Sonic boss music, if you ask me. As far as if we're talking about like act end boss theme. I mean, final boss theme is a whole other thing, but for this one, just a classic one to start with the da 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 da. Like it's just it gets you hyped up for that kind of pulsing bass drum rhythm that gets going into the battle. It's a short loop, but it is an engaging boss theme on Sega Genesis for sure.
I'm pretty sure this is the one I've heard the most when people talk about Sonic boss fight themes, outside of like the stuff that would end up in Generations. Yeah, no, this song's really, really good. That's some Genesis buzz bass in there. I can't remember when we talked about it, but like, you can always tell that MIDI, that sound chip.
I wonder if it was Gunstar Heroes. That kind of makes it think
Yeah, that would have been Gunstar Heroes, I'm pretty sure.
I do have to throw out a quick shout out though to the Act 1 boss theme from Sonic 3. And this is one where, like, you're listening to this, and, like, how did people not think for a while that Michael Jackson wasn't involved in this game? I mean, that, woo, sound effect. Like, granted, apparently someone in the YouTube comments says it actually comes from a sample library called Skip to My Loops by Norman Cook. But, like, come on. Like, you're channeling that Michael Jackson energy. Just had to throw it out there as like kind of feeling his influences that were still somehow left after the scrubbing of all of that.
This is such a weird song. The Act 1 bot, I don't know what else to say other than it's bizarre.
That it is. It's a different vibe. We'll get to number 3 on the critical track though. And this is, I think, the classic. It is Ice Cap Zone. I mean, just right from the get-go, that dun, 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 the thumping bass just gets you into it immediately with the chord progression. And you're paired with this visual when you're playing Ice Cap Zone of Sonic snowboarding down a hill. I think it's arguably one of the most memorable stage themes from Sonic 3, if you get that far into the game. Just a classic theme that I think is paired really well with like the snow ice vibes. Like if I had to pair like a synesthesia bit with it, like it just feels and sounds dark blue. And I think it's just paired super well with that, starting off on that C minor chord and then down. Man, Love it.
This is the best song of the game,
Yeah.
bar none. Now I do remember where I heard it outside of having not played much of Sonic 3. Smooth McGroove has a version of this song, and it's really,
yeah.
really good.
Phenomenal.
So, yeah, like 100%, this is the best song in Sonic 3.
Let's take a song from Sonic and Knuckles, though, and what do I think stands out the most on that soundtrack? I would say it's number 4 on the Critical 5. This is Flying Battery Zone. I suppose you could pick Mushroom Hill, you could pick Doomsday, but for me, Flying Battery Zone is the winner here. Also, I feel like it also being recognized in Sonic Mania is pretty notable. This one is just bonkers, though. The pace of it all is just unmatched. You just almost feel like the mechanics moving around in the background in this piece of the Flying Battery imagery that's going on. The slapping bass and percussion just like it just really gets you going. Sonic and Knuckles has some great tracks as well. I feel like Sonic 3 is the better overall game as far as like levels and tracks and all that. But this piece is the standout from this game for me.
I don't think I've ever heard this song. Somehow. Even though I've heard the name Flying Battery many times. I don't think I've ever heard this song. I agree with you that like you can sort of hear the mechanical stuff moving in the background. This portrays it really, really well. Mostly I think the percussion is a lot of what does it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this song's really good. It's really, really good.
It definitely is. And then we'll wrap things up on the Critical 5 for Sonic 3 and Knuckles with, you guess it, it's Final Boss. The beginning of the piece just has this slow tension that is like the perfect build against the egg robot when you're fighting him in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And then it just goes into this frenetic pace that is so good. The melodic part that we highlight here at the beginning of the clip, actually, the da 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 da, that's the part that people believe that it's referenced in the credits. And it's like that's kind of carried over. I don't know what else I could say about this song, but I feel like whenever I think of Final Boss themes and like the best ones out there, granted, there are ones like Dancing Mad or One Winged Angel that stand out for sure. But when it comes to like a classic 8 or 16-bit track, I think this one is one of the greats.
This one I know for sure I've never heard until now.
What? That blows my mind.
Yeah, I've never heard this song. It's a really interesting opening that isn't at all what I expect Sonic Final Boss songs to sound like. So I feel like I'd remember if I had heard it. It's really good. But yeah, this has somehow avoided me.
Amazing. It's just so good. I feel like this was another one. Like we talked about the Cypher admin theme from Pokemon Coliseum of like what got me appreciating video game music. There were a couple from Sonic 3, and like this is one of them. The other one, oddly enough, is one on the cutting room floor. So let's get to that. I have a couple here that just missed the Critical 5. I just could not justify putting this one in the 5, but it had to be here. This is Hydro City Zone. Or Hydrocity Zone because it's like velocity and Sonic has a lot of speed. I feel like that's actually a meme kind of going around right now as we're recording. Like,
Yeah, I saw that today.
yeah, I was gonna say like, T. Lopes posted his track from Sonic Mania, and it's 2 words, so therefore it has to be Hydro City. I've always said it as Hydro City. It's because it's a water level. It's the second level in Sonic 3, and it's a water level. But man, this piece, it's just insanely good jazz for a 16-bit console. Like, are you kidding me? How does it sound this good? You just get this great swing syncopation here, and the instruments, again, on Genesis, just hitting just right. I mean, going into the chorus is, I think, perfect. The little da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-ba-da, like the hit that comes in there. Man, I can't say enough good things about this one. This is probably my favorite piece from the whole game. I just couldn't justify putting it in the 5 amongst those standouts.
I love me some syncopated swing, baby. Absolutely adore when that shows up in games. This song is really, really good, honestly. It's no Ice Cap, but it's pretty good.
I remember it as, in 2006 when I got my first cell phone, a Motorola Razr.
Oh.
And you could take your own custom MIDIs and put them as ringtones. Hydro City MIDI was the first one I did, baby. Love me this song. The other one on the cutting room floor for me, I struggled with putting it here, but I had to. It's Carnival Night Zone. I really wanted to put the special stage theme, which people now remember just as, it's Blue Sphere. I really wanted to put that theme here, but because of the Michael Jackson involvement, and we have to hear, what are some of these sound effects? What's the glass breaking? What's the jam bit? I had to put this here. Also, just because it's a song that drives people nuts. It just drives you insane, not only because of the wacky kookiness of it, but this is also the song you're hearing when you're struggling with that darn cylinder puzzle. And that'll just drive you a little mad. Also, the melody reminds me of Chris Rock and Madagascar. And you go da 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 Afro Circus, da 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 Afro Circus. So yeah, there's that. But yes, you do hear in the clip, you hear that glass breaking. And then also with the jam, it's ba 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 jam. It's pretty evident that it's that part from Michael Jackson.
You know that meme when somebody posts a GIF or something and describes it as my last 2 brain cells?
Yes.
That's this song.
Uh-huh. They're just kind of dancing around. Boop, 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 boop. So yeah, I would have wanted to put plenty of other tracks here. Maybe I could have shanghaied you into putting a couple on your cutting room floor, even though you have no experience with it. But because of the Michael Jackson connections, had to do Carnival Night here. So what will I never forget about this game? Well, I feel like I've talked about plenty with that cylinder puzzle, with using the shields and the electric shield. Are you kidding me? That's the coolest thing. Giving that little extra jump, and it collects rings, and oh my gosh. It's just a lot of the Blue Sphere. Blue Sphere is stupidly fun for a special stage that you collect the Chaos Emeralds. It's so much better than the race sort of setup in Sonic 2. So just a lot of great memories with Sonic 3. And I feel like with the whole Michael Jackson connection, I was an internet child of the mid 2000s. I remember that video for sure. But learning about like how it's developed over the years and how we've gotten different feedback bits from the different contributors with Michael Jackson, I feel like fleshes out one of those game mysteries even better. Game mysteries that like we shouldn't know like any details. I feel like in time, it makes me think of Kojima and Konami. Like, we're never going to hear the full story. But in time, you might get enough people talking that like you may start to piece some things together. And I feel like that was this in the mid 90s. Michael Jackson working on Sonic 3. Wild.
Also, statistically, somebody will die at some point, and that will be the floodgates letting out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's how it always goes, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm glad that we got to talk about 2 games and highlight 2 composers that are Black. Black composers need more exposure in the game industry. Give them more work, and we're going to do our best to highlight them here on this show because it's certainly overdue.
Let Chase Bethea work on Watch Dogs.
Yeah.
He sounds like he'd be really good at Watch Dogs.
I hope there's another Watch Dogs game, but I don't know, did you see the story?
Oh, yeah, there has to be that first, I guess. You're right.
But did you see the story where it was like in a game with Watch Dogs Legion that was like warning about the dangers of drones and like too many drone surveillance and all that? Ubisoft is partnering with like a drone company to do like how Ubisoft.
This is the same company that's putting out NFTs and is the only one that has refused to back down. It doesn't surprise me.
You know what? That's fair. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want. That's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed that has the podcast episodes and all that on Spotify. But we also have a Spotify playlist. I mean, if we cover a video game track on the show and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to that playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
So Reality is on Spotify. Pretty much most of Chase Bethea's stuff seems to be on Spotify. But the earliest Sonic game on Spotify that I can tell is Sonic Adventure. So they haven't gone any, and I did actually notice while searching for this that Masato Nakamura has his own like compilation soundtrack of 1 and 2. Didn't know that got put on Spotify until like an hour ago.
Weird.
But yeah, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is unfortunately not on the service.
Not surprising with the legal issues with the Jackson estate there.
Probably a not insignificant factor in that.
Yeah. Well, when you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? And give us some suggestions for games or artists to cover in the future. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Well, I will be talking about Akihiro Uchida.
I will be talking about Isao Abe. There's a pretty strong theme between those games as well. All right, to play us out, I got to talk about Hydro City Zone. It's my favorite song from either Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Sonic and Knuckles. And let's see, who's done a Hydro City Zone cover? Oh, there's this one. There's the 8-Bit Big Band did one. And it features Grace Kelly on saxophone. Oh, she killed it. This sounds remarkable. I love this, and I hope you enjoy it too. Thanks so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.